So, episode 4 of the Train by Fox podcast. This time we have special guest John Jewett. I'll let the guy introduce himself for those who don't know.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for having me on. I do appreciate it. So, for those who don't know me, I'm John Jewett. I'm an IFBB Pro, 212 competitor, turned pro 2016 in the heavyweights at the NPC USA Championship. And I think now I'm at my, I don't know, somewhere like ninth or 11th pro show, something like that. So yeah, I've done a few pro shows. Best placing has been fourth at the Olympia in the 212s, and
Everyone
right.
will know that.
And then so right now we're just in the midst of my 2020 contest season, where I'm just doing show after show and just keep going. So that's where I'm currently at competition wise.
Who's currently prepping you?
I'm sorry?
Who's currently prepping you?
I'm currently prepping myself.
That's what I wanted to see. That's a very interesting subject as well, because are you always prepped yourself, or?
Not always, but I've done it before. Like first starting out, my first 3 years of competing, I was 26, and so I had gone through getting towards my master's degree in nutrition around that time, and always seeking out to learn. And who was like the educated thinker in bodybuilding. So at that time, like Lane Norton had put out a lot of information for natural competitors and bodybuilding.com that was very thought out. I was like, this is great. Like I understand it. It made sense. And through what I was learning, at the time, I was a broke college student, which of course I sacrificed on having a coach to just buy like supplements and probably some bullshit I didn't need. And I just coached myself, and it turned out pretty good. Like I did pretty good, and I did that for 3 years until I actually was nationally qualified and won the Branch Warren Classic here in Texas. Which at that time, like getting nationally qualified actually like still meant something. It was competitive. Like you had these guys that were coming back through to get requalified for the national circuit. So my first national qualifier, I got like 9th place, and the top 5 guys, 3 of those guys went on and turned pro at some point in their careers. So it was like, this was good competitive lineups. And so like I got qualified. I'm like heading into the 2015 USA's, my first national show, 12 weeks out. I'm like, man, this is like really stepping up. Like I want to make sure I don't leave something on the table, right? And that I'm ignorant in some way to a way of doing something or learning something new. So that's when I started working with a coach. Did that for 3 years, had another spurt where I did a year myself, then had another coach for a year and a half. Then the past, I guess since just this past Olympia, I've been coaching myself into these past shows.
So that kind of touches on the first subject I wanted to go over. Like your life and experience of like you starting out training, going through them like amateur shows to then turning pro and going from pro to placing 4th in the Olympia, and then this year's kind of prep. So we're like in those years of you kind of prepping yourself, reading the Lane Norton stuff, was that if it fits your macros?
No, it wasn't. I've always been a real like meticulous spreadsheet kind of nerd.
Yeah.
I had written out diets since high school that I made because I was so just intrigued to improve. And I was powerlifting at the time.
Yeah.
But I had diets that I was following, and it's when I got into college and powerlifting, I met kind of this other powerlifter nerd with his spreadsheets. And he gave me my first like Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my God, this is genius. It had like the food and it had the macros, and it calculated out the macros on it. And so I started building off those. And so I always had this planning that would take place through all that. So I had a set diet, but I knew all the numbers along the way.
That's
so
cool.
It made sense, like in a contest prep, to be more predictive using the same food sources to know the response. So even back then, like I had good people around me that were educated. I was looking into like good education sources. My first kind of like moving from powerlifting to bodybuilding, I read a lot of elitefts.com stuff, Dave Tate, Jim Windler, of that group. And so the first real influence through that was Justin Harris and Shelby Starnes, because they kind of had this intermingled like power building approach. And I started reading on these guys, and like Justin Harris could cite physiological processes and make logical sense out of his approach. And so that was kind of my first introduction into like a thought out bodybuilding area. So I was, getting into DC training, high effort, which coming from powerlifting was like, this is perfect.
Yeah,
Low volume, put a ton of effort into it. Like that makes a lot of sense. Moving up the logbook, I like it because in powerlifting, it's all about chasing numbers. But still having like the diet meticulousness that I was already doing. So I was always pretty detail oriented. And I think that's probably what led to some good success as an amateur, because I was never winging it as far as just how do I feel for the day. It was always a planned, and I could look back on that plan and make more educated assumptions or, guesses off of what I was seeing.
But that I feel that also helps you kind of to emotionally detach yourself from a prep, and kind of like you've got X, Y, and Z tasks to follow.
Yeah, it does. It does. It definitely does now. I will say like that first prep I ran was extremely taxing from an emotional standpoint, a mentally standpoint. For one, I'd never been that lean before. So experiencing that physical feeling was a bigger hit perception of mentally, but then also coaching myself and not knowing where I should really be, where I would really land on stage. There was a high pressure I would put on myself because I want to be competitive, So I was willing to do whatever I needed to and push myself to extremes. And I did. Probably I was more so the one to push before I would ever pull back. Like, hey, John, you should maybe take a break today, take a rest day. Maybe it's time for like a little extra food. It's like, no, just keep going. And
keep pushing.
I remember I was walking to school one day and I just stopped because for university, it's like you park far away from campus and have to walk. And I just stopped like halfway there. My legs were just so dead and just fatigue was so high. And I just like, God damn, I just think I just might sit down here and just like, or go back to the car and go home. It was just like, I remember that moment of like, fuck all this.
Did you feel like a hypo feel, or was that just like fatigue, tiredness?
Fatigue, just a mental, like just fatigue and a physical fatigue. Legs were aching, felt like concrete, felt like drudging through like sand, that type of feeling. Not hypo or anything.
Were you working? Like, what was family life like? Was you with your current partner then, or was you single?
Yeah, I was married at the time. Now my ex-wife, go figure, going through my first prep, but so I was going to university, and then also at that time I was a graduate assistant, and I was working, and then I also had a few. I was starting to just coach some people on the side as well.
That's cool. So
it was like, yeah, I was super, super busy. So even the mental aspect of where I was spreading myself was pretty thin.
Is there any nootropics on the market back then?
Fuck.
The new fad?
No. I think back then, I was just taking caffeine ephedrine. I think that was like just what was accessible to what I had. And that probably had me super irritable too. I just remember when I had that in, it was pretty edgy. And using some yohimbine, which really drove anxiety up too.
Yeah. What kind of milligram dosages was you running at like early stages of that prep? Can you remember?
Yeah, no, I do, because I remember reading on like Lyle McDonald had some good articles back then on it and like the effective dosage ranges. And I was doing 25 milligrams of ephedrine HCl 3 times a day, along with 200 milligrams of caffeine 3 times a day. I think on the yohimbine, I had taken it up to like 8 milligrams fasted in the morning, something like that, which I know like for like effective dosing was like 2 milligrams per.
Is it like kilogram or some at
point? Yeah. It is per like 0.2 milligrams per kilogram. Yeah. So like you could, for a 100 kilogram person, you could go up to like 20 milligrams, right? That would be effective dosing, but not to say you can't get more out of less.
I was gonna say, yeah. because I see people running dosages between like as low as 5 milligram, and then as high as like I've seen people run 30 milligram. Obviously, for only short exposure, but yeah.
I just, to go back, it would be like, well, that's the effective dose they use in some study. It's like, well, that's what you have to get up to.
Yeah.
And so the feedback now is like, no, use the minimum to get the result, and then add in as needed from there. So
on
that was
spreadsheets.
yeah.
What, like within that first prep, and then you kind of competing? Was this the Branch Warren one?
No, this was in my hometown, San Antonio, the Lackland Air Force Base Classic. So
Is that still running?
It is actually. That show's been running since the 1980s.
That could be a perfect guest pose.
I wanted to, but it's we have so many shows now, and now it's not quite the same. They don't even have guest posers anymore.
Oh wow!
It used to be badass, man. We had Ronnie, we had Phil Heath, Kai Green, Flex Lewis. Those were all back-to-back guest posers those years. Wow. It's like 5 years of like just guys right off the Olympia stage. Then nowadays we don't even have guest posers.
Shows don't have the financial backing to pay some of these guys now.
They don't. That was it. Because I talked to them about it. They're like, we'd love to have you. You like, come do it, but we don't have any funds to do anything for you. And like, yeah, no, it's understandable. You don't want to drive down the value of like guest posing pros, by all of a sudden these pros are doing it for free, which it's cool to expose people to pros posing, but at the same time, you got to respect your trade.
Of course you have. Going from that, like, as I mentioned, the Branch Warren show, how many years after kind of that first show was that? Did you say 3?
Yeah, 3 years. So I was doing a show a year because I knew that off season time. I knew I did. I think I probably should have taken like 2 years off to just grow, but I didn't have a perception then of what I really needed to happen to move up levels. I knew I needed off season time, but I thought a year would be it. And I definitely made improvements. I think early on, that's when I could have used some type of guidance from someone that had been there that could say, hey, you have this potential here. We should take this amount of time, monitor the response, and then go in. Because for me, I was kind of learning and reading, but at the same time that you just can't beat experience from someone.
No, I agree. And like the question here would be for me and anyone listening is, so you essentially here have kind of coached yourself through like 3 or 4 years of being competitive and competing each year. Yeah. And I see like a lot of coaches kind of, and I think people do need coaching 100%, but I think they also, if they've got close friends and people that have walked the walk, they can coach themselves. What would your advice be to anybody kind of looking to compete? They can't financially afford a coach. What material would they look at? I'd go the J3 University route.
Yeah. Like, damn, what a hell of a plug. Yeah, I guess that's how like my current business came about, was j3university.com, which has been a place that I wanted as to help someone just improve their physique or coaching. And even being, if you want to self-coach yourself, to understand the process to really optimize it, whether it's, and what it is lectures and modules broken down into sections. So you learn nutrition, training, PEDs, how to monitor your health. And then at the final modules, I put it all together into, hey, this is how you structure a contest prep and progress. This is how you structure your off season and progress. And giving you those thinking processes that I kind of early on had to make the decisions of where you should be traveling in your journey. So I hope it builds more of a framework of understanding rather than like, this is what you do, because I don't think you can do that unless you're an individual coaching someone, but it should give you that framework to help understand the process.
I think what I learned from why I signed up to it, for example, here is I was essentially looking for an extra person's view and opinion on dieting for physique, let's say. And I come across one from 3D MJ, I think and I was like looking, and there was no actual, and this is not being derogatory towards what they're offering, but there was no, to me, it didn't look bespoke. It looked like they'd pre-written it, gave it to a company and said, sell this. And then when I'd watched your like trailer and stuff, like, which I've got to say, you made a very good selling point in that video. And I was sat there with my other half, and she was like contemplating, what should I get for your birthday? And I said, oh, well, there's this. And I'd not clicked on like the price. And I was like, wait. And I was going to pay XYZ for 3DMJ. And then I was looking, I was like, John looks like he's updating this all the time. And like the initial module, I think it is just, it's like your basic kind of data, taking body weight measurements. Like, again, this is around 3% backing rent. And even like, I'd go as far as me saying as a coach, there's certain traits and things like we're not a library. We can't intake everything and remember it. Like, I still look back in my book of notes and look at when I'm doing client check-ins, like, right, what's this? And I was listening to some of those initial lectures, like in the background, because I thought, I already know this. And then you'd say something and I'd go, wait, but what did he say? Rewind and go back. So I think that would be useful. But if, let's say, for example, they're not that they've not got the financial backing to invest, let's say they just don't want to invest, people can be tight-fisted. What would your advice be then?
Yeah, I think, and going back to myself, what I did was have to invest time, because starting out, if you don't have money at a younger age, well, I had time, that was for sure. So where I put my time into the resources that I had available to educate myself and who I could educate around. So I guess that's the question now, is where should you find this information to put your time into? And I think there are still a lot of really, really reasonable resources to do.
Yeah.
One that had come about that I think is still like excellent is Scott Stevenson's book, To Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. Yeah. Like, it's exactly titled what you wanted to do. Yeah. That's a great read. There's a few other good books, but to not have to go, like, some people aren't going to want to dive into the actual schoolwork, because you won't learn how to actually bodybuild and apply yourself. Yeah. So I think trying to surround yourself with those that have gone through that experience is really beneficial. So you need someone that has had their own experience doing it. If you're going to have someone that gives you advice, they should have been able to give advice to someone else successfully and led that person through the process. I think that's where we see a lot of poor coaching application, is that you take advice from, everyone has advice about the nutrition or training. Hey bro, train like this, do this. Like, well, who have you coached and how do they look now? Or it's not even about how they look, because there's a lot of top guru coaches that have like these genetic elite, which we can't even compare to what they do. Yeah. Well, what did they look like before, and then working with you, what do they look like now? So have you led someone through that process? Have you led someone similar to me through that process? Like, hey, I'm this average Joe guy. Can you get average Joe guy in shape or build muscle? And then do they have some type of education and logical backing behind that? Like, if you ask them a question, can they give you a sensible answer that makes sense to you? Or do they have like the zealous, like, because I said so, or I'm PhD, or I am top guru coach? Like, that's a very defensive answer to someone that probably doesn't have a great explanation. But if I think someone that's a teacher at heart that wants to help, educate you and have that explanation, I think those are like the three attributes I would look for people to kind of disseminate where to spend your time. YouTube, there's a ton of free information. And I think you have some great guys on there too. Just like guys you mentioned, there's a lot of great videos for training. Like Mike Israetel puts out a ton of free stuff on massing up. John Meadows has a lot of great information for diets, training, and both of those guys are very logical minded. Eric Helms, another great educated thinker. And these are just a few of the guys. Like PED usage, I think trained by JP, Jordan Peters has for $10 a month. He tells you how to do everything. It's like, those are great resources. Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach. So I think there's a ton of information out there now for cheap. And it's just really trying to disseminate who is right to listen to and not. But I would always go back to those three pillars. Have they done it? Have they done it with others successfully? And do they have some type of education, logical backing in their explanations? And I think that could help sort people through the mass of information that's out there that can lead you really astray too.
I think you've just got to make sure that you're not signing up to be a guinea pig, which I've learned in my experience. That's like essentially, and this again, I'll take ownership because I didn't do my research in certain situations, and I think we live in a world that information is very rapidly regurgitated, and people have said, like, let's say this, some of the greatest things you've learned from coaching yourself, you could implement with somebody else.
Yeah.
Could also rewind it very fast if you feel that it's not working. Now, if somebody hasn't necessarily done that themselves and they've been coached by, I'm going to say Peter, you've been coached by Peter and Peter was very successful at getting you in shape doing X, Y, Z. That doesn't mean that you coaching Adam and doing X, Y, Z is going to get them in shape. And especially from a health markers point, that's going to potentially be detriment to their,
Yeah. You know, even leading when I did get a coach for nationals, as a bodybuilder, especially a younger bodybuilder, you're very driven for your goal, and it's hard to see past just that one show. And as a bodybuilder too, that's very competitive. You may want to make sure you don't leave anything off the table, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey, coach says to take X, Y, Z, or you need to do this much cardio or train like this. It's easy to take those things to extreme. It's a much harder sell for a lot of guys that are competitive to say, hey, you don't need to do this, this, and that, or just do less. Like, do less? What do you mean do less? You kind of want to make sure that you aren't, doing the least. So it's hard to find that middle ground, especially in that mind state of being young, goal driven, and not being able to see that, hey, bodybuilding is really long term, in a sense. Long term, like, hey, you might at 26, like probably 36 is when you could hit your peak. You got 10 years in doing this. What comes after that the next 12 weeks of your show? It's like, oh yeah, maybe I should think past that point. You see guys that burn out that we never see again. No. Because they live in that just 12 weeks and aren't thinking to the 10-year mark when they're peaking and they're trying to get to Olympia. So I made a lot of those mistakes coming up of like doing a lot, but having done a lot, I also know
not to go there again.
Where not to go and where it had value. I think understanding each of those variables now and always being able to say, like, why am I doing this? What is the need for it? Can I make sense of it? And if you can't, then it probably doesn't need to be in place. And I think the biggest discrepancy is probably with PEDs, right? A lot of people want to hear about that because I've run the heavy stuff, going in through USAs and getting my pro card, where it's like everything. You're taking everything, right?
Yeah.
All the estrogen blockers, aromatase inhibitors. You're taking, 4 different orals, 5 different injectables, growth hormone, insulin. You have it all, and it's like, I don't even know what's working. And so I think that's when it gets hard because you'll get in shape for a show, like you said, and you took all these things. It's like, well, damn, I needed all those things to do it, but you don't question, like, what were they all being effective still? Yeah. What could I do without, or was there something else that might need to have been in place and other things removed? And so until you kind of like pull it all back and add in as you need, you don't really know it.
No,
and that's where I've been at now. And I'm currently using the least amount of PEDs in a prep that I have ever used. And I'm the most conditioned I've ever been. However, the caveat to that, to put some perspective into it, is that I have been 212 for a while. So I have some established muscle. And during that past time period, I was really pushing up and growing as well. So that's stuff to weigh in and like trying to move through that. I'm not saying that you can use
lower everything and
yeah. Like there's an escalation that needs to take place in PED usage based on need, and that should go up to a certain mark. But then, like, if you get to a point where you have the development for your division, you could probably pull back a lot and not have to keep pushing these cycles to hold on new tissue.
Like, we had Joe Jeffrey on the podcast last. I don't know if you know him. I think you've had him on a podcast recently with Alan Range.
Yeah, I know Joe.
And Joe talked through like having a rule book through like a prep, and he was saying basically like, right, I'm going to lose roughly 1 pound per week If I don't, I will adjust. I'm only going to take X amount of milligram per pound or kilogram of body weight. I'm not going to differentiate from that. There is no way, under no circumstances, am I going to add in any kind of fat loss medication or whatever you want to call it till this point, because I will not need T3 for a prolonged amount of time, and so on and so on. And I think that was a very good point. I think that's like you going on that, like through your prep for the last Olympia where you placed fourth, from in comparison to let's say the show that got you your pro card,
Mm-hmm.
and you getting on the Olympia stage. Not now, I don't necessarily want to know the complete thing, but was you taking less heads during that kind of those two preps?
Oh yeah, it was easily, I could say it would be a third.
So you heard that, people? Come on, like look at your stack design.
Even now, from that Olympia prep to this prep I'm currently doing, I'll tell you my current total milligram dosage per week is 600 milligrams.
Wow.
I'm 5 weeks out. I use no orals. It's just injectable. So that was a thing for me, is because I am more sensitive to like lipid alterations, and that's, I think, heart health. Well, brain, heart, and kidneys are like the biggest concerns in long-term PED usage. And a lot of the orals that go in place are terrible for lipid profile, oxidative inflammation, stress on kidneys, heart. So I think if I don't need to use an oral, I'm going to try not to. And so I had implemented some for like New York and Indy, these past shows that I did just for the last 2 weeks. But then I had to weigh out like, okay, why am I implementing these? And there was a rationale. It's like I had some strength detriments, and to hold on to that training performance and have something fast acting, that made sense to add in, while an injectable would take a few weeks to build up and have an effect.
Do you use like Anavar, halo testing?
That I'd use both. For Indy was Anavar. Then for New York, I added in Halo to see if there was a actual visual improvement, or if the strength improvement was better. Honestly, I couldn't tell the difference between the two. I think, yeah, and so that is what it is. I don't think visually wasn't different, because I was fucking hard for either one. I just didn't have much body fat on me. Now for this show, I haven't used any, and training performance is upheld because I think I've managed fatigue even better. And being already lean, I have more food. So more food is driving my training performance. So I don't need drugs to, if that makes sense, and it's almost like, gosh, that like when you come off the show, your post show and you raise food up, you're like, man, training's flying through the roof. Why would you need more drugs during that time period?
No.
And so same thing goes, like if you're ready for a show a few weeks out, potentially you could back down in compound usage, because food and managing fatigue is going to be such a bigger driver for muscle management than just having to continue these high doses of drugs, and you probably potentially decrease stress. The risk to that is like, well, what if it diminishes my look and I can't get it back?
You look softer.
So fair enough point. That's when I would say it's just an idea, but as you go show to show, I think you could probably mitigate some stress load by making educated reductions if you can.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, like, if you allowed yourself a longer duration of time for your first show, you've been hard for that, and you've not got a show for 3 or 4 weeks, more than likely the amount of sheer workload that you've got to do between that show and the next is going to allow you to reduce overall ped use and allow you to kind of rest.
Definitely.
I like that.
And I had to weigh in, because this is a long prep season for me. I did the 2020 Olympia. That was in December. And then this indie show was in May. So, you basically have 5 months.
Yeah.
And I didn't have really an off season. I brought my body weight up some, and I felt good. And then I stayed lean. So I ran a 12-week prep and came down.
What was your year like kind of prepping in 2020 over there? Did you find, because when did gyms open in your hometown? Obviously you're pro, so you could train anyway, and you probably know the right people.
Yeah. So we have like a family-owned gym.
Amazing.
that a few people could train at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were shut down, but it was only for about 6 weeks until they started eventually opening things up. I immediately had gotten some stuff in the garage to train, and I had a few workouts out there, but I didn't have any limitations in my training, fortunately. I know I hate even saying that, because I know how some
rough people did have it.
got shit luck on that, but
I built a wooden squat rack on my backyard with like some 4x4,
okay,
4-post thingy, and we have like a narrow alleyway in my backyard, so I planned it all out so I could bench and this, that, and other. So I was like laying between this alley, so I could get my bum at the bottom of the bench, my back. And have you seen where people bench press with their knees bent and the feet up? I was practically laid like this, and my legs was like this.
Okay.
As I was pressing. I'm very grateful for it. And then I built it all. And then guy who I trained with, Callum Rainstrick, you also had him on your podcast. He bought and kitted out his garage. And I messaged him saying, before I build this, can I not just come and train with you? You're like half an hour up the road. And he's like, no, mate, it's not safe yet. Blah, blah, blah. I built it. I did 2 sessions. No, ignore that. Probably 2 weeks. And then he says, oh, come over. I was like, do you know how much I've just spent on this crap? And then my partner was like, you do know that you're chopping that down now. So yeah,
into the squat rack.
it was I'll have, you know what I do after this thing, I'll forward you the I put it on an Instagram post. I'll forward you a picture of it. Now, best memories of like, this is favorite lifts, probably favorite training sessions of when you was like amateur and building up to competing, prepping, blah blah blah. Would this be the years of the animal?
Well, I got on with Animal after I turned pro in 2016. Okay. Yeah, so that happened right around that time. I had been with Redcon 1 for like 2 weeks. I mean, not 2 weeks, 2 months, around there too.
Was Animal? Was Derek Lunsford? That was around 2016, wasn't it?
He came on the following year.
Did you come to the UK Body Power?
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
I didn't. No. I missed a year for it. I ended up messing my ankle up and not being able to travel. But yeah, he won in 2017.
Yeah.
And then that's when he Derek came on. You know, immediately go back to like my powerlifting roots for some of like the most fun that I've had, because you're such in a big group, and it was just crazy back then. We trained on a back porch, we enclosed it, and we had built all the equipment too. Like my buddy welded. Now he built his business is Texas Strength Systems. That's all he does now. And so he built all the racks, and we would just have music blaring out there. And those are some of the funnest workouts that I remember. So leading into bodybuilding, you kind of go into like a training of solitude, of solo. And I just train alone now. And I actually prefer to train alone. I don't like training with anyone. Even the times.
Reason?
It's kind of been my time, and I focus really well on like what I have to do and execute. And anyone else unless they've been like ongoing with me, and we kind of just know what needs to happen, right? You know the loads, you know how to spot them. You don't need to talk then, or minimal. Then otherwise it's like a distraction, or someone that wants to come train with me, like, hey, I want to come train with you. To me, it's like you have a training program, and I'm extremely serious. Obviously, this is my career that I want to follow and execute to a T. My workouts are laid out a certain way, to where for me to go jump in a session with someone, like I might accumulate a ton of fatigue. It might fuck my whole week. Doing a different lift, I might get injured. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And same with someone else jumping in with me, it slows kind of my rhythm down. I'm end up usually having to train people and explain, like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to execute it this way. And then it's taken away from my time of what my job is in that session. But I enjoy the quiet. I enjoy just being in my own head, and I don't need anyone screaming or yelling at me.
No.
That actually is more of a distraction to put the height. And I know people that like it and they want that, but I'm a very like kind of introverted person, and I can build it all up in my own head of where I need to go or where I don't need to go. Because I've also had that in that powerlifting sense, it's taking me to incorrect places where that threshold is so high. And then all of a sudden I'm just lifting out of like this crazed animal rage, and I'm not controlling the load like I should be, and leaving myself maybe susceptible to injury as well. So yeah, like my wife, we go to the gym together, and she's just like me, and she's a wellness pro. And so she does her thing in silence, and I do mine in silence, and
that's perfect.
Pretty much. But even then, there's some cool sessions that stand out. Like the first time it was like second time I traveled up to animal headquarters, and I got to train with Evan Sinapani.
Oh wow!
In the Universal Gym, which is really cool because above the gym is like this pharmacy facility, and then the gym is actually underground, so it's in this basement, so it's completely dark in there. It's all Universal animal around the walls. And then Evan Sinapani was an influence for me. His first YouTube videos that came out talking about food and the logical rationale of what he did and why.
Budget to bulk.
Yeah. And so I had to train with Evan. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's like, you know, meeting your famous celebrity, and like you're now just training with this person on the animal team. Which I remember we were supersetting low cable rows and into deadlifts.
Oh shit!
Yeah, it was like, what the fuck? I had to fly home that day. I was totally fucked. My lower back and everything.
You know, you say supersetting as well. Like how many rounds of that?
I think we did three, maybe like a feeder set, then like 3 rounds, 3 actual training sets.
I was hoping it was on one hand.
I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I just don't puke all over the place, because like it was cardiovascular taxing. Like I was more of a straight set, take a break. I don't superset often, low volume. So yeah, that totally messed me up. And I was heavy too then, deep in off season. Evan was definitely in a better shape than I was. So that was a really cool session. And then also when I got around my pro card training with a group of guys that was coaching me. Matt Jansen was coaching me at the time, and then Turner Riddle was up there trying to get his pro card as well. And just us hanging out, it was just like hanging out with the guys and going through some cool sessions where we were all like mentally on the same page, what our goals, what we're doing there. We understood how we trained because we're all kind of under Matt in the same philosophy. That was a really, really good time that stands out as well. So yeah, those were a few.
When you mentioned your other half, like, how long have you been together?
Sorry, who?
How long have you and your partner been together?
3 years.
3 years. How is life during?
Should I say prep? 4 years? I can't remember.
Do you kind of compete around the same time as each other? Do you try and make it land, or?
So this has been a battle because of COVID, and the shows were all over the place. So for was it 2000? Yeah, last year, 2020 was when we had planned Renee. Like wellness division became a thing.
Yeah,
and Renee's made for it. She's totally built for it. We're like, all right,
this is lower off's phenomenal.
We're gonna plan for this show. And she started prep in January, and then COVID happened like February, March. So like, oh shit, well, you're already dieted down. Let's push back a little bit. So then it's like she finally gets to a show in August once we had kept pushing back. And she ended up after 3 shows, and by September she had turned pro at North Americans. And that's around the time I was starting prep for Olympia. So she was in prep, then I went to prep. So we've never been like in the same phase together, which we don't like. I'll tell you, like, at least for us, it works better if we're both on prep or both in off season. Mentally, we're tuned the same. We kind of disconnect the same, you know. In prep, it's hard to like have that closer intimacy
Yeah.
And you're so like, you're just trying to not starve. You're like, I want this cheeseburger more than I want to like hug on you, you know? And so currently we're prepping together and we're doing the same show, the Chicago Pro,
Amazing.
which is cool. And, you know, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Just compete together. And
You
that
can
was
just
kind of our goal for this year.
You can just kind of balance your, like, you know what her best look is, and she knows what your best look is. And again, basically fill each other with confidence, or have each other like, right, sort your shit
Yeah.
out. You can do better.
Yeah. Yeah. So it works well. Cause I know others that I coach her too, that couldn't coach their spouse or take feedback from their spouse. Cause it's hard to disconnect of like,
Yeah.
is that my husband talking to me or is that my coach talking to me? Like, is he calling me fat today? But we're both like very similar thought process, and Renee is such a hard worker that I'm never the one to be like, hey, you need to try harder. Like,
Yeah.
never ever. If
You just
anything,
take
it's me
inspiration
saving
from
her.
her.
Yeah, for sure. Like she's been goes to her garage like every morning and practice posing 20 minutes. She's reviewing her posing footage at night. Like she
Jeez.
puts more into it than I do in my posing, which kind of it motivates me as well. So we do feed off each other. If anything, it's I have to save her from herself of like, hey, we need a rest day or we need to pull back. So that makes it easier coaching her rather than me always trying to be like, you know, the police.
Push. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
police, hey, you can't eat that on prep, or hey, you need to like push yourself harder, because that could get obnoxious.
Is she meal prep driven, like yourself, like, or is she kind of, if it should fits your macros as such?
We're both kind of a mix of both now,
That's
which has also made prep much more livable. Like coaching myself, like I have the flexibility to move around foods where I need them. Like if I have, hey, my hunger signaling is super high around this time, well, eat more at that time and don't eat more when you're not hungry. Like that makes sense. But when you have someone coaching you, they're like, they probably won't give you that level of detail.
No, because it's too much work. It's too much work.
Yeah.
I have that like in one of my coaching, like in one of my check-in sheets. There's like a hunger fee of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, right, okay, at which point of the day was this the highest, and at what point of the day was this the lowest? And then going into their next, let's say, amendments to their nutrition, if I have to, I can then go back to that and go, right. And then realistically, normally the response I get from them is, why have I got so little food in the evening? I was like, if you go into your check-in, you're least hungry there. Like, I'd rather fuel you here than make you try and force feed yourself here. I like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And also like it makes your client experience so much more enjoyable on prep, and it removes some of that suffer and which is a mental stress, and that it will like precipitate into the physical. You know, I truly believe that. So Renee and I we'll stick to a set food base. And that might change just slightly, but like it's like, hey, we're gonna, you know, sub cream of rice out for actual rice or something. It's not like major, like we're subbing out like a Pop-Tart for.
What's your favorite cheat meal, John?
Sushi for sure. A typical bodybuilder move. And then
what is it? What's it like over there?
Oh man, we have great access to sushi as far as that stuff goes. Yeah. And then like favorite dessert wise is definitely like old fashioned sour cream donuts, and blueberry coffee cake, like a coffee crumb cake. Yeah.
Wait, I don't think we have that in the UK.
Oh yeah, it's just like a cake base with like a kind of a crumble topping.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cheesecake kind of.
Not like a cheesecake. Oh, I guess there's some crumb cakes. It's like a cinnamon butter crumble.
I'm gonna, if I could find a picture.
Topping, like kind of the top of it's like a muffin almost. It's like a muffin cake if you describe it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like even Renee, like that's both of our go-tos.
That's bang on. So what is next? We obviously know you're 5 weeks out from the Chicago Pro, is it?
Well, now becoming Friday will actually be 3 weeks out, so it's really close. That'll probably I keep saying probably that'll be my last show of the year. I had planned for Indy to just knock it out, and you know I got third there, then I got second in New York. I'm currently the point leader
Yeah.
for Olympia qualification points. So I figured Chicago, even if I didn't win, I would probably lock in my point position to go to Olympia that way. And I never wanted to go off of points, but man, it's tough. With just depends who shows up to these shows. And I had to really weigh out, like, man, if I can't win a pro show, like, should I even be going to the Olympia? It's like, well, hell, you've been fourth at the Olympia.
We're gonna
It's
say,
a physique that's competitive.
and if you, let's say,
So
Chicago, you get the points you require to go to the Olympia. There's like not that you do this for the passion of it and such, but that's a paycheck. That's a paycheck.
yeah, that it's a good motive. Like, my business takes off when I compete, but I never did that. I never competed initially for that reason. It was always because I just loved to do it. And it's always, for me, always about improving myself. And that's why I like bodybuilding so much. So every time I get on stage, I need to have that improvement there. So if from Chicago to Olympia, I know I can't improve, and it would be worse.
Yeah.
I don't think I would do it. I'd rather go to off season, and that I could completely walk away from Chicago and not being qualified for Olympia, knowing like what do I need to be the best John next is off season. That's perfectly acceptable.
Would you then just go?
I absolutely would go off points.
Would you then go, like, let's say you don't do the Olympia this year, then you went to the drawing board. Would you consider attacking next year?
Yeah, I definitely would plan for the 2020 Olympia, and then we would have a better solid schedule. 2022. Sorry. And also the schedule this year was shit. Like,
terrible.
Because we didn't know when the Olympia was going to be. I thought it might be in December again.
Yeah, I thought that. I assumed that. And where is it? Is it October?
And
October the 10th?
It's October. So I was going to do Indy, and then I was going to have like a chunk of off-season time and then do Olympia. But that didn't work out. So now I have this like really shitty segmented
14 weeks till the Olympia, I think it is. I think roughly around then.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I'll have like 11 weeks till the Olympia, which is some time, but I mean, it's not no off season, that's for sure.
What does your average days look like then? How busy is work at the moment? Like, you got many guys kind of competing? Have you got many guys and girls competing?
It's, man, I can make myself as busy as I want to be, and I need to say no more. Yeah, especially working for yourself, and when you start out, you'll take on like any client that comes to you, and if you're not working, you're not making money. So it's hard to get to a point where you have to say no and know your limits. And I've definitely overworked myself, and so now I'm taking a lot less clients on. Yeah. I took on 2 this past month as new clients, but my main focus has been J3 University and promoting the content for that, so I don't have to coach as many individually. I can help more people on a broader spectrum.
And I think as well, like, what's great is if you're coaching more athletes, is yes, having a coach is still a large luxury, but for them it's more of a luxury. It's their passion, isn't it? It's not just, I need this result. So you taking on more, and it hinder not necessarily the quality of service, but the amount of time you can dedicate per client, and that's going to hinder. And then once J3 is, well, it already is great, but once you're kind of happy and right, okay, now I can reduce my total time on improving that, I can now open up spaces for 2 or 3 clients.
Yeah, and I have to think of like big picture, long term as well. Like, what I do currently now in my like more prime years in bodybuilding, it's definitely going to set up more. I'm not that great of a bodybuilder to say legacy, but I think it is important to really make the most of my time in bodybuilding because it's short lived, and that will carry out a lot of the business aspect when I am done bodybuilding. So I still want to prioritize my own self. I am my own greatest client. And now, rather than, hey, I need to coach all these individual people, and they rotate through. And so I think right now establishing like J3, establishing myself, then I'll probably always be able to get clients. And I don't mean that in any type of arrogant way. I just, from just a logical business standpoint, I'd have the experience backing and this platform of education to help people. And there would be people that would want an individual level too. So rather than kind of like taking so many individuals on and spreading myself too thin and not being able to compete at my fullest or give J3 its fullest. So that's where I have to kind of limit my time.
Do you feel like you've got a good ground at that at the minute, like on across the platform?
Yeah. No, it's we took off. We for J3 University, we far exceeded what we thought we would initially, and it's grown every single month with more student enrollments. So it's been excellent actually, and there's so much more I can do with it, and so much more content that I want to add. But it is very time consuming to build those lectures, which is part of the issue. Is like being on prep. My brain is limited, so
it's like you're on prep. You've got this amount of work to do for your prep, and then I imagine the rest of it, you're basically stapled to that chair.
Yeah, pretty much. It can be pretty sedentary. So I have to some prep. I have to make sure I'm pretty active and do walks after meals, so just to keep the energy,
expenditure
output a little higher.
Because I see this from my opinion in like you being an IFBB pro and being a very successful coach is kind of like to me that doesn't not like I look at that and think no, impossible. But then I look and think, right, well actually that is possible because John's very, very, very educated. And then you look across a lot of, and I don't mean this in a negative comment to anyone listening to this who is a coach or is a very competitive bodybuilder, but are you coaching because it fuels your current position? Like you're not earning enough, like you said, you're not doing this. You didn't start out competing for an income. It only happened to be that you turned pro, you get a sponsor, you get paid essentially for your placing at a show. Now, there's not many people that, in my opinion, have personality or work ethic to work outside of competing.
Sure.
So then they become online coaches and all they're selling is their physique. They're trying to sell sex. Like, look how great I look at what I've achieved. If you work with me, you can do this. And then when they start having clients work with them, those excuses that you says where, oh, it's because you're doing that because of this. If you're not doing it, you don't want it enough. And I speak to people and like I have clients that say, oh, Michael, I'm potentially going to want to compete in a year or two. And I'll say, right, well, I've never actually prepped a female client. However, that's because no one's ever given me the opportunity.
Sure.
Now, I will literally go out and invest more than you're paying me to ensure that you get on stage with the best part of your health looked after. You get on stage at your absolute best. I will not let you get on stage without that. However, if you are looking to employ another coach, then let's sit down and go over who your options are and let me please help you choose, because I know in this industry how disgustingly people are treated and looked after for what they're paying.
Absolutely.
And I think for that, like, and you probably like I don't talk names or it, but you probably know a lot of highly named coaches whose coach clients that you now coach, and you've probably gone, I can't believe I'm hearing this about that coach.
Oh, easily. There's a lot of abuse in the industry from people that just, I don't, it's incredible. They just out for the wrong reasons of why they're coaching.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, that coaching is probably for another reason.
100%.
It's, or to fuel something. Like a lot of people coach as an income so they can go bodybuild, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those things kind of come in line, but I guess for me, it was about, I thoroughly enjoyed educating people, and that's my real passion. So that's why J3U is like, that's what I love to do. I enjoy coaching, but there's some limitations in how I can educate people, and I get spread thin. Like I'm having to repeat myself to each person, and how much I can give one person online is so limited. So that's why I'm like, well, this is perfect. And that's where my passion lies in learning and teaching. And I'll have to say, like, coaching, I enjoy it, but not nearly as much as I do as like just being more of a classroom type teacher, you know? So, but I think you need to follow those passions and let that lead, and the money will be there.
100%. On the
there, you
go on, you first.
You had asked about like quotes or things that stand out, and one that I read that I really liked was, light yourself on fire with passion and people will come for miles to watch you burn, which it sounds kind of dark, which I like, because I have like, I like the sci-fi dark type stuff, but it's true. Like if you are that passionate about something and you shine that bright from that, people will come to see what you're doing and want to learn from you or teach or, you know, gain something from you in that sense. So follow those passions is what I've always wanted to do, and do it for the right reasons, which it shouldn't be for income or status or recognition from others. It should be for that further developing of yourself, that self-actualization to this higher level, what be your fullest potential as a person. And when you're seeking those things, that's when you'll really shine and be successful, and the money will be there. You know, it'll come.
And it's like in this industry, I think so many people, and I don't want to carry on with this, but they're looking for numbers, number of clients, number of this, and they need to understand that this is, again, going back to what I was saying, this is a large privilege for people to financially afford coaching. At some point, whether they need a new car or house improvements or repairs, that you're going to be, if you're not passionate and if you've dropped in the way that you deliver your service, that client's going. And I
completely agree.
And if you're not like looking at constantly either educating yourself, improving your service or whatever, you're soon going to be going back down the job list at your local newspaper or whatever website to try and find another job. And then it's going to be, coaching was shit, this was shit. No, you did it for the wrong reasons, and that will happen to everyone.
You need to be able to share like that passion and love with people. And another quote for you too is, people never remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And you know, if you have a client and maybe you're not the best coach, you're not top guru, but they're always going to remember the passion and how you made them feel, knowing that you cared about them and shared that passion and love with them. And to have a coach that truly cares about you, man, that client would never leave you. Even if you're not the best, like you don't nail it at a show with them, but they're giving you their all.
They're with them. Yeah.
Some clients would leave you anyway, and that happens, right? And it's unfortunate. And
just emotionally detach yourself from that.
But that's probably not the right client that you want anyway.
Yeah.
You want those people that are loyal and that see that passion in you and are connected on that level. And that's the people that I want to work with too, that are passionate and hard workers that love it. And I don't need the genetic elite. That's not actually who I even want to work with. It would be nice. But again, the people that I want to are those people that are just loyal and that love bodybuilding and just want to work hard. So
next question. Do you have any spaces available for coaching, or are you fully booked?
It's been super limited. If someone comes across that has that level of passion and seems like a right fit, I will take them on.
Yeah.
But I get quite a few inquiries, and I have been moving them on to some other people that, like you, would refer to, that I trust. So as of right now, I would say no, I'm not.
Just for anyone
especially
listening,
till my shows are over. That's for sure.
Yes, yeah. This year's out. Well, right, John. I think that's a very, very good one. We should wrap up there. Potentially get you in after your next show is in 3 weeks. You said, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Then is it kind of from there? You'll have around 11 weeks to the Olympia.
If I'm qualified, that would be about 11 weeks, which I would find out pretty quick because there's only a few 212 shows left after that.
That's cool.
And Renee, I would love for her to get qualified as well.
How many potential, like, what's where is she with like points and all of?
Yeah, so Chicago will actually be her pro debut.
That's amazing.
So I have I have high
Got a big job
expectations for Renee. But the plan would be Chicago and then go to Tampa for her if you needed another show. If she didn't happen in Tampa, we would probably wrap it up there, because there's girls that on these girls are crazy. They just do show after show. Like, you can't compete with point. I won't let Renee compete for points with them, because I won't draw her physique out like that. Especially for females, it's harder to stay on prep that long.
How is like, another probably personal question, how does her like menstrual cycle get affected during a prep?
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's stayed around longer than it has, because I think for last year was her first prep ever, and it was a long duration of a prep, and so she took on a lot more fatigue than she could. But this time we managed it really well. She's 3 weeks out, and she just missed her last menses. So it just missed it. Like, so her last month, she still had one. So it almost came back, because when we decided we couldn't do the Puerto Rico Pro, we increased food, and she had a little bit of spotting that was occurring, and it basically would have returned. So I kind of think like, hey, if we went post show, she could probably get her menstrual cycle back pretty quickly. So, which, I think it's tough, man, because it's very individual.
Taking any birth control?
No.
Cool.
Just do a hormone replacement. Like Renee, she's 34.
Yeah.
And so she's already have some, like, being a competitor, I think you'll run into more of the pre-menses symptoms, more so than if you were not ever competing. So she already had some more detriments of like low progesterone level, a lower testosterone level, and then some abnormal menstrual cycle abnormalities, more like anxiousness and bloating and things around that justified doing like a hormone replacement therapy with her. So so she does cycle normally, but we do still have her on like progesterone and make sure people understand this, a testosterone replacement dosage appropriate for a female.
Is it HMG?
No, she takes actual testosterone cypionate.
Okay.
But it's at
very low dose
level. And to give perspective of what that is, it's like 5 milligrams a week.
Yeah.
Okay, not 50 or 500. It's what about a normal female would produce a week, and she's very responsive to that. So 5 milligrams for her puts her close to like 80 nanograms per deciliter, which is right where I like females to run. I've had some females have to take double that amount to put them in that range. And I think that gives good insight into building how we should dose PEDs for females.
For females, yes.
Based on response. And Victor Black's talked about this. I think it's very educated.
Very clever with it. And it's like, again, going to Victor Black is one of the things there was like the long-term neglect that a lot of coaches place on female competitors when they're using like orals like Anavar and stuff for prolonged durations of time. And he was talking about ways that he would implement tracking where he'd essentially record the voice, take pictures of the privates, not him personally.
He would send me your private pictures.
There are many coaches out there, and so I thought that was very useful. But
sorry to get off on a tangent on that.
No, I like that. That's actually kind of got me on the question of how would you feel about potentially yourself and Rennie coming on and talking about like her prep and
I would love to.
Females would love that. I think the dominant thing through podcast I see is it's very male dominant, and there's a few like Victor, there's Joe's done one. I think I've seen a couple of others, but in terms of like, I'd like to go into probably a menstrual cycle thing she's had to do with PEDs and stuff, and then probably go back into a background of competing and training and so on.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent. I think there's a lack of transparency amongst females of a fear of judgment. On J3 University, I have everything transparent of Renee's prep.
I've literally I've got like a calendar of how I want to map out what I watch. But every time I look at my phone, 3 days later, J3 University, John added, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, this one looks good.
So I wanted the female aspect on there. So Renee's like her whole wellness prep, everything I've done with her is there. It's not perfect. There's a lot we don't know with females, but there's so much that we are learning to improve on. I've done things wrong with Renee that I just didn't know at the time I thought was right. And so
that's just data collection, isn't it? It's just
it is. It is. And I can look back and understand, and we're improving that process. Because I see, I have a lot of wellness girls come to me now because Renee's done really well. Yeah. And I see what they're doing, and it's fucking insane. Like one of the top, I won't mention him, I don't know who he is, but he's top wellness guru. I've seen what he runs on these girls, and it looks like a WPD cycle. I shit you not. And it's nearly for weeks on end, like the whole year. And it doesn't make any logical sense of why, but the dosage levels are what I have are more than what I have WPD clients running. And these girls don't care because they just see the pro card in sight or the pro show in sight.
They're just looking at what that bigger, But I think with that is like, I see it and I see some of these cycles, and I literally look and I'm like, this particular person's probably selling that cycle as like a PDF. Like, like, do you want to put 10 pounds of muscle on? Here's my PDF. Here's your stack design. Here's your training, and it's probably
might as well be.
And we all buy into that crap. I remember I'd pick up the muscle development magazine and I'd go straight to the supplement page. Like, what do I need to buy this week?
Right.
Yes. What do I need to train? And I'd be looking at workouts, and I'd be like, now I know that a lot of it's kind of not generic, but potentially the safest thing to implement with someone, rather than saying, right, you're going to do a set of 5 to 8 reps and you're going to go to complete failure. Because how can you prescribe that without? Anyway, losing the draft again. But if you want to speak to your partner, make sure she's fully comfortable with it. Like I'd be happy for her to kind of run through the storyline of how she'd want to discuss it, because again, that's her area. I'm going to be studying like, so did you do this? And I'm probably going to be 4 steps ahead and then have to go 10 steps back. And if she wants to kind of put something together there, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think she would definitely be up for it. She's definitely more bashful, I think, on in these aspects, and not as far as like willingness to share, but she's just a quiet, introverted person. But I know I've told her like she can be a really a voice for what female competition should look like as far as training, monitoring health, using or not using PEDs, and what all that entails. So I'll talk to her about it.
And then the life of living with a bodybuilder, an IFBB pro that coaches her, which is to like one of my friend Christian Chapman. He coached his he was prepping and coaching his missus, and she won the overall at a recent Two Bros show. She'll go pro soon, and like I couldn't be more like, that was the first visual I'd seen of a couple that actually look like they love each other, rather than it being like this is a business. And it was lovely to see. But right, John, won't take any more of your time. I'll let you get on with some work. Thank you very much for coming on. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Where can anyone listening to this find you or find more information about J3 or so on?
I'm most active on Instagram, which is at JohnJewett3. Renee and we did get more active on YouTube as well recently. We're documenting our prep. So my YouTube is just John Jewett. And I also have the J3 University podcast, which are on there, also on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. And then, of course, j3university.com. That is my big education platform to better yourself as a bodybuilder, female or male, and as a coach. So that's where you can find me at.
Perfect. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, buddy, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Talk to you next time.